In today's modern age of drumming, you can find ghost notes used in so many different styles and grooves. If you're scrolling through Instagram or TikTok, you'll see tons of different patterns involving ghost notes on the snare drum, and it really helps fill out the style and texture of the groove. If you're really into funk or R&B or gospel or even some modern church music, you will commonly hear ghost notes within these styles. And I will say ghost notes do not fit in every style of drumming, but having the ability to put them into a variety of grooves is a very useful skill to have. If you've ever tried to play ghost notes before and then you listen back to yourself and realize it just doesn't sound quite right, hopefully this video will give you some quick tips to help fast track your progress in learning ghost notes. The biggest issue I hear when my students start trying to play grooves involving ghost notes is a lack of clarity in volume difference between the backbeat and the ghost note itself. So when we play ghost notes, generally we want to play them with a really low stick height. I'm a fan of still keeping the beating spot the same on the snare drum, so still aiming for the center and just allowing my stick height to be the thing that separates the volume. And I kind of like the volume of my ghost notes to be similar in sound and texture to an unaccented hi-hat hit. Because oftentimes when we're playing grooves that involve these ghost notes, it's kind of nice to blend that texture of the ghost notes into the hi-hat and almost simulate a kind of shaker sound. So as we go through these exercises, I'm going to play every backbeat as a rim shot, and this will just further allow the volume difference to be really clear between the backbeat and the ghost notes. And I'm only going to play my ghost notes about 2 inches off of the head and making sure that I'm just getting a good wrist stroke. The first exercise we can do to start putting ghost notes into our grooves is keep our right hand on the hi-hat and keep our left hand on the snare drum, and we're just gonna play 16th notes, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, leading with our right hand, but split between these 2 different surfaces. So if I play just that pattern with no volume control or anything, it's gonna sound like this. Now what this is doing is keeping steady 8th notes on the hi-hat, which we use pretty much all the time when we're playing different grooves. And it's showing your left hand where there are opportunities to play notes in between those 8th notes on the hi-hat. So now all we're gonna do is play all of those left hand hits, all of the E's and the U's as ghost notes, and still keep our right hand at a nice volume. And you can see as I'm doing this, I'm kind of naturally accenting the downbeats with my right hand. You can choose to keep this just all full volume 8th notes if you want. I like to kind of add a slight downbeat accent just to provide a little bit more texture to the groove. Next, let's put our bass drum on beats 1 and 3. So 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. And at the slower tempo, you really want to listen to the placement of that left hand on all those E's and the U's, making sure it's nice and even. It should sound like steady 16th notes between your 2 hands. We want our bass drum to still be full in volume, and we want to control that left hand to be nice and low. One of my general rules when anyone is just starting to get into ghost notes is the count before and after the backbeat. We are not going to place a ghost note there. So on beats 2 and 4 is typically where we play a backbeat on the snare drum. We'll play that as a nice full rim shot. the note right before and right after those counts, I am not going to play a ghost note. And the reasoning for this is I want to allow my left hand enough time to get a nice big stroke there to play a backbeat. So now if we take that previous exercise that we were just doing, all I'm going to do is add a backbeat on beats 2 and 4 and remove the ghost notes that were before and after counts 2 and 4. I'm going to slow this down a lot so you can see what's taking place there. Once you get that pattern down, you really need to check in with the volume control that's happening in your left hand. So you could even start by just isolating that left hand pattern. Now, if you notice in my left hand, after I'm playing these backbeats, I'm doing what's called a downstroke, which just means my stick is starting high and ending low, but I am not digging the tip of my stick into the drum head. I know there's a lot of drummers out there that like this sort of backbeat sound, where they essentially do a dead stroke into the head. I'm really not a fan of that technique or sound. That's totally fine if you enjoy that. But I want to make sure that my stick is always ready to go to play a note. And if I'm dead stroking, that means I constantly have to reset my hand in order to play another note after it, instead of just playing a downstroke and stopping the tip of my stick low to the head. And I'm getting this effect with my left hand not by over squeezing the stick to stop it low, but just allowing my back fingers to stay on the stick and resist the natural rebound that occurs. So really slowly, let's piece this all together again, taking our first ghost note groove here. Once again, make sure you're checking in with that left hand and getting a good separation in volume. Let's try this a little bit faster. Now this is just one basic example. You notice that we kept the kick drum pattern very simple, only playing on beats 1 and 3, but you can start to add different kick patterns with this formula of ghost notes in the left hand as well. One kick pattern that always works really well with this hand pattern that we were just playing sounds like this in the context of the full groove. So there my kick drum is playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and my hands are still doing the exact same thing that I was doing in the previous groove. Another little building block to adding different ghost note variations in your grooves is this concept. So now I'm actually going to play 2 ghost notes back to back. And so what's going to happen is one of those ghost notes is actually going to land with my hi-hat. But if I wanted to play a bass drum pattern that sounded something like this, one, a 2, 3, a 4. And I want to fill that space between beat 1 and the of 1 with ghost notes. We now have this happening just between the kick and snare. If we add in the rest of the ghost notes that fall naturally on the E and A grid that we were doing before, we now have this happening between the kick and snare. And if we piece that together with 1/8 notes on the hi-hat, this is the groove we now have. So if I take that little building block plus the concepts that we worked in with the previous grooves, I can come up with a variety of different sounding grooves just utilizing those different pieces. So once again, as you're working through this stuff, make sure you're practicing slowly and you're really controlling the volume that's happening within that left hand. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.